I've been reporting on media for about 15 years, and I well remember almost 10 years ago the first story I wrote about Mark Scott as managing director of the ABC. I'd rung around an awful lot of people who'd worked with him at Fairfax before that to find out what they thought of him, and came up with differing views. I won't say sharply differing, because people didn't feel all that passionately about him one way or the other. In fact, one comment which I quoted was, "He's vanilla." Nothing in particular. Nobody is saying that now. Nobody is saying that now. I also wrote a very critical piece about a speech he gave to the Sydney Institute about bias at the ABC, in which he indicated that perhaps the ABC needed to do more about political bias. It was a vehement piece, very strongly worded. I looked back at it just the other day and was amazed all over again that the response I got from Mark Scott was not to be taken off the drip or told that I was never to darken his doorstep again, but an invitation to lunch. It was a good lunch. And by the end of that lunch, I thought, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be worth watching. 9.5 years later, I think you'd have to agree that that was the correct conclusion. When Mark Scott took over the ABC, the Jonathan Shire period was a fresh memory. It was embattled. I think it was defensive. It was demoralised. Today, it still faces numerous challenges, but it's established over that period 2 new television channels, the ABC3 and the 24-hour Current Affairs News Service, and ABC2, which was already established, has come into its own. Lots of other things have gone on again. Arguably, the ABC is again embattled and facing an uncertain future, but it has been an extraordinary 9.5 years. But Mark Scott, as he has announced, is coming to the end of his term. Next year he will stand down, and we don't know who his replacement will be, although many names have been thrown around, some of them even in this room. So that's the context in which Mark Scott has agreed once again to address the new news. I've learnt from him that he very rarely agrees to invitations of this sort if he has nothing to say. So I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming Mark Scott.
Well, thank you, Margaret. And can I also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and the land on which we meet tonight, and pay my respect to elders past and present. It's a wonderful setting. I was reflecting coming in here tonight that when I fleetingly thought for about 2 or 3 weeks in my early 20s about doing a Bachelor of Divinities degree, and I passed on it. I never thought for a moment the opportunity would avail itself for me to stand at the pulpit here at Collins Street Baptist Church, and even when I accepted this invitation from you, Margaret, I did not know that this would be the venue. But it's lovely to be here, a very different setting, and it's nice to be able to reflect a little bit on the challenges facing the ABC and what I see as the opportunities facing the ABC in this digital era. One of the ABC's great achievements in recent years has been our pursuit of quality Australian stories, the finest drama on our screens. This year, The Secret River and Glitch, recently The Code, Redfern Now, Marbo, The Slap, and coming soon, The Beautiful Lie and Jack Irish. But no matter which production partners we choose, the directors or the acting talent we employ, no matter the literary text we are using or the size of the budget, there is no Australian drama like the Australian drama that rolls out on television when the nation's leadership is changing and the nation is changing. Fetch the popcorn and settle in. There is nothing quite like it. And like the best dramas, in recent years we've had a number of return series. Call it the killing seasons, if you like. Events in recent weeks have caused me to reflect on how ABC News has changed and where it's going. That Monday night last month, as we watched the scurrying in the corridors, the march into the party rooms, the breathless whips with the result, the explosion of camera lens shutters at the Victor's press conference, I reflected back to the first in the series of leadership coups when Julia Gillard rolled Kevin Rudd. On that night in June 2010, Chris Ullman and Mark Simpkin had broken news of the challenge in the ABC's 7 p.m. bulletin. But with no free-to-air news channel, and limited experience at delivering live rolling news, the ABC failed to bring the story adequately to the Australian people through that night. In its stead, Spicks and Specks was enjoyable, as always, but not quite as memorable. And those who didn't have pay TV missed key elements of this compelling and important Australian story unravelling. What a contrast to that recent Monday night, where audiences flocked to the ABC, covering all the movement and detail for hours across all platforms: television, radio, online, mobile, social. Record numbers of live streams, frenetic audience engagement as news of the vote broke during Q&A, audiences logging into the News 24 broadcast from all around the world. And when those audiences returned in massive numbers the following Monday, there was a 22-minute live interview with the new Prime Minister on 7:30, revealing an updated personal portrait on Australian Story, a forensic reconstruction of the coup, beautifully shot and told on four corners. The comprehensive nature of the ABC's news service in this digital era has not emerged by chance. It has been a clear strategy to deliver on the ABC Charter. And I acknowledge that it's not come without criticism, with some well-meaning critics concerned we're too focused on digital plans and social media, and suggesting we've failed to prioritise a news-breaking culture. Tonight, I want to reflect on the news business and the place of the public broadcaster in it, and I'll respond to some of those criticisms at the same time. I've discussed some of these issues previously at the University of Melbourne at the invitation of Margaret Simons, and I'm pleased to have that opportunity again tonight. As Margaret indicated, I've said that I'll be leaving the ABC in the middle of next year, and if this speech inspires you, applications to fill that role close at the end of next week. I note that the job advertisement says that the right candidate will have responsibility for ensuring the ABC's success in augmenting and reinforcing a sense of Australian culture and identity in the context of a rapidly changing global media environment. That last line, the rapidly changing global media environment, is, in my view, something of an understatement. Now, I still have plenty that I want to get done over the coming 8 months, so I'm not about to start giving a valedictory address, but this does present an opportunity tonight for me to think carefully about what we've been through and the changes that are still coming to our business and the business of news. And at the heart of these changes is one very simple concept. Consumers are changing the way they demand and access news services. And I want to talk about how at the ABC we have changed our news culture and practice, and why funding is so important to that ongoing role as a trusted and valued national broadcaster, and what changes we can expect in our newsrooms as the information on demand generation takes full control. We're now well beyond the notion that news is something to be bundled up and consumed at certain points of day in the news cycle. The news cycle today rolls on without pausing for breath, and new rules are being written by new players, and many old truths about our business are just that, old. News has been central to what the ABC has offered to Australians since the 1930s. The Charter speaks of broadcasting programs that contribute to a sense of national identity and that inform the Australian community. And not just in broadcasting, the Charter also states a function of the ABC is to provide digital media services. And in doing so, maintaining the independence and integrity of the corporation is a key duty of the ABC board, as is ensuring that the gathering and presentation by the corporation of news and information is accurate and impartial according to the recognised standards of objective journalism. And in all we do, the board needs to ensure that the ABC's functions are performed efficiently and with the maximum benefit to the people of Australia. I'd argue tonight that the ABC has flourished in this digital era, meeting these requirements of the Charter in a way that has proven vital to the national good. And at the ABC, it's also time to pause and reflect with the departure of Kate Tawney as Director of News after what has truly been a remarkable time of change in both what's on offer to the audience and how the division has been structured to deliver it. Kate is a single-minded revolutionary and she assembled with her what I believe to be Australia's finest news executive, with the determination to stake out the ABC's position as the nation's leading provider of news. In that period, we've witnessed the ABC develop an invigorated and revitalised news gathering capacity. New directions and different ways of looking at our news operations have enriched our established radio and television bulletins, while at the same time feeding the continuous output of news across the new platforms of online, News 24, mobile and social media. And tonight my central thesis is that the public's investment in news at the ABC represents better value for taxpayers than ever and is more important than ever. In a sector facing endless existential shocks, an investment in the ABC is a sure bet in vital national infrastructure, an independent, broad, comprehensive, local, national and international news service. As commercial media operations struggle with market forces and the slow decline of their business models, the role of the ABC, in particular in respect to news, is becoming increasingly vital to the health of our democracy and our culture. And nowhere is this being more keenly felt than in the regional and rural areas of Australia, where news operations are contracting at an alarming rate. At the ABC, we acknowledge our role in the wider media ecosystem. We understand the role we can play in working with commercial media, particularly in regional Australia. Speaking last year at the ABC's annual showcase in Canberra, the now Prime Minister, speaking in his previous role as Communications Minister, summed up how he views the public broadcaster. The ABC, my friends, is more important than ever, he said. It's always been a vital part of Australia's public life, a vital part of Australia's journalistic life, of our whole body politic. But it is more important than ever because as the inexorable changes wrought by the internet have done so much to undermine the business model of the other great foundations of journalism, the big metropolitan newspapers, the responsibility carried by the ABC is more important than ever. And he's right on several levels. A strong and well-funded ABC is of great benefit to the nation and its democracy, as extra funding in the past has clearly delivered. Additional government funding of $20 million per annum in the last triennial funding settlement led to a significant change in the ABC's news operations with a great result for the taxpayer. It's led to a series of ongoing projects in ABC News specifically designed to change the way we gather news, to move to a new culture, to allow us to better meet the needs of audiences. And we've sought again to hold on to these benefits after the funding cuts last year, putting our audiences first. The news gathering projects, as they were called, were designed to increase productivity, increase news output, and ensure ABC News remains fit for purpose. Let me talk about some of the things we've done. In July 2013, we created the National Reporting Team, a team of top journalists who do investigations and break stories across all programs and platforms. And its team of 26 journalists have made significant contribution to reporting on all those platforms. And in the past year, members of the National Reporting Team have won 2 Walkleys and a further 5 were nominated, and they've won Quills and Clarions and a host of other industry awards. In August 2013, we set up the ABC Fact-Checking Unit, which independently verifies the accuracy of claims made by politicians and public figures, advocacy groups and institutions engaged in the public debate. And since its launch, the unit has completed more than 400 fact checks, fact files and social media slates. And those stories have seen more than 4 million views of the election promise tracker. And while critics complain at times about the unit, not a single verdict it has delivered has been successfully challenged. Our new interactive digital storytelling team produces innovative journalism designed for online and for mobile. And since its launch in early 2014, the team has created more than 350 pieces of interactive content, which have had more than 16 million page views and been shared nearly 1 million times on social media. Last year, we launched localised online news homepages for every state and territory. Before that, you got the same ABC News service online if you're in Broome or Burnie or Broken Hill or Brighton here in Melbourne. Since we launched those new local websites, the ABC in South Australia has increased its reach from 12% of the local market to 17% in South Australia. And state editions have driven greater engagement and a 57% increase in page views. Again, an investment bringing a strong return for ABC audiences. And this investment is ongoing. This year we launched a regional division to ensure our audiences in rural and regional Australia had access to the same services as those in metropolitan Australia. And the regional division will work to guarantee the ABC's footprint in these areas remains strong across television, radio and digital. And we've beefed up state and local news coverage across the nightly bulletins and through news specials, and so far our audience has reacted very favourably. But we're also seeing a key change in the definition of news. Let me tell you what I think are news stories in this era. The Checkout, Triple J's Hack, Sean McAuliffe's Mad as Hell, The Weekly with Charlie Pickering. All these have contributed to the idea that news is just not something that's delivered across a desk with reporters doing piece to camera. News can be open to interpretation and can deliver key information in new and entertaining ways. Audiences, particularly younger audiences, are demanding new news formats, and media organisations must meet the challenge of adapting to these formats if they want to guarantee an ongoing audience. Sometimes you have to take risks, and some will be appalled at even mentioning those programs in the context of a discussion of news. One risk I look happily back on was an Andrew Denton creation, Hungry Beast. Over 3 seasons, Hungry Beast was an edgy way to look at news and current affairs. It was unashamedly youth-focused, and it thumbed its nose at conventions of news reporting. And it's proven to be a very fertile training ground for some incredibly talented people. Just to name a few of the alumni from that program, Kirsten Drysdale is now at the Checkout. Ali Russell is a producer on Four Corners. Monique Shafter is a producer and reporter on 7:30. Dan Illick and Mark Fennell have gone on to other projects at other networks. And the amazingly talented Patrick Clare is now based in LA. He did graphics for Hungry Beast, and last year he won an Emmy Award for work on the opening credits of True Detective. Part of the ongoing responsibility at the ABC is to continue to attract the next generation of smart, creative, dynamic talent, and to bring new stories in fresh ways to audiences, and to challenge the venerable old public broadcaster itself. Reflecting back on when I started at the ABC, it can seem like a generation ago rather than a decade, and that's not just a comment on how I've aged. Back then, in 2006, Facebook was the domain of American college students. Now it's used by 1 billion people a day. We knew nothing of Twitter or Instagram. Your mobile phone seemed smart because you could carry it and it made calls. We didn't all carry cameras with us, or video streaming devices, or fast search engines. Few texted. There wasn't video streaming of news. The month I started, the infant YouTube was uploading an impressive 65,000 videos a day. It now uploads in excess of 300 hours of video content a minute. At times I've laughed with some old colleagues about what felt like a torrid time when I was at Fairfax over the decade prior to 2006. Who knew that they would now be seen as the good old days of print? Newspapers were fatter back then, and there were more of them. In broadcast, proprietors protected TV programs like Sunday and Nightline. But thousands of jobs have now been lost in the nation's newsrooms. The Journalists' Union, the MEAA, suggests 2,500 jobs lost just since 2012. The ABC's charter says the broadcaster must take account of what is taking place elsewhere in the broadcasting sector, and we have. The audience has changed, the sector has changed, and the ABC has changed. The ABC took advantage of the arrival of digital television, multi-channelling, to provide the only 24-hour news channel on free-to-air television. We looked to recruit specialist news journalists in important reporting rounds when specialisation was increasingly becoming lost from newsrooms around the country. We have maintained the crucial investment in foreign bureaus, in long-form current affairs on television and radio, in regional and rural centres. And what we've done, we've sought to deliver excellent value for money for taxpayers who fund us. And recently we commissioned a review of the ABC News, and its insights make for interesting reading. On the television platform, the ABC for nearly 5 decades shaped all its content to deliver 2 news bulletins a day. Over the past 5 years, however, ABC News has achieved a 30% growth in total consumption hours and grown television reach by 10% over the same period. At the same time, ABC News has achieved a 20% reduction in cost per broadcast hour. News 24 was delivered through an assertive reworking of the ABC's television cost base, overhauling production processes to extract savings. And News 24 was delivered without any additional government funding. These achievements in news embody fulfilment of the brief to perform functions efficiently and with the maximum benefit to the Australian people. With so many content choices available, so much information, so many soakers of time, media organisations of all kinds have had to assertively reach out to audiences. We've needed to create new product and more product. We've needed to understand our audience better and be where they are rather than expect them to come to us. The reality is that audiences are coming to the old platforms in fewer and fewer numbers. But the ubiquity of fast broadband and cellular services, along with mobile devices, has seen a dramatic increase in the demand for news and information. And the ABC has met that demand in a compelling way. ABC News Digital has seen a 54% increase in reach over the last 5 years. And ABC News has proven more resilient to the general market decline than most major competitors in terms of average audience, particularly in regional areas. And News 24 was the first free-to-air television channel to stream all its content in Australia, and it's done that since its earliest days. In the newest platforms, social media, the ABC's performance is clear. The ABC has the top Australian news presence on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Vine and Instagram, as social media traffic continues to be the main traffic source for the ABC's mobile site. Over the year to June 2015, the ABC's YouTube channel surpassed 85 million views, almost double its nearest rivals. And on television, we pioneered in this country the seamless integration of the viewer's social media contribution through the tweets live on stream, on the screen, on Q&A. Now, this has not been without risk, as some of you may have noticed. But I also mention the same critics who claim we don't have a news-breaking culture. In our newsroom, we call it distinctive content, reports that are either broken by the ABC or given significant new information or fresh angles by our journalists. Some of our competitors in print might tag such reports as exclusive and print that in red ink before they publish them at the bottom of page 7. Our figures are impressive. 21% of ABC 7 p.m. news bulletin stories are ABC distinctive content. 20% of radio news stories. 76% of 7:30 program stories. 92% of radio current affairs stories. And 39% of total online news items. We are breaking news and delivering news to the Australian public. And then there's a story like Making a Killing, the Four Corners report by Caro Meldrum-Hanna and Sam Clark that exposed the use of live baiting in the greyhound industry. In the 3 months after it went to air in mid-February, it's been re-reported nearly 1,800 times by non-ABC outlets and nearly 1,000 times in different stories across the ABC. The program triggered a major police and RSPCA investigations across Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, and 5 separate government inquiries. The boards and CEOs of racing regulators were sacked, laws and legislation have been rewritten, the criminal penalties for live baiting have been doubled, and now there's a special inquiry into the greyhound racing industry in New South Wales, all from one single program. We see the strength of the ABC's news gathering skills in the performance of our websites and our mobile sites. Some years ago, we came to the conclusion that we had underinvested and underdelivered in news online for our audiences. And again, we overhauled our work practices to create these straight editions, which have driven our traffic. And now we're looking to broaden our news site, to tap into all the wonderful ABC content that's created at places like Radio National and local radio and regional radio and the television division, and hauling that together in a much bigger and more comprehensive news site for our audience, making that content easier to find in one deep, rich location. Our news and current affairs websites were up 37% in weekly visits last year, and we expect to see even larger growth in our mobile sites and apps. We're chasing down new ways of storytelling, thinking how we can use data and graphics to make stories real and compelling. We're trying to work out what content works best on which platform, overcoming our original assumption that video works equally well on television and online and mobile and social media. We also understand more than ever before the importance of the audience voice, the value of the audience contribution, and that the future of our storytelling will increasingly need to be in partnership with our audience that wants to contribute. But at the same time, I would argue that in the midst of embracing the new, core elements long evident at the ABC have grown stronger than ever, and that the gap between what the ABC is offering compared to commercial networks is growing. ABC News means having 3 different ABC reporters at 3 different positions across Europe, making the epic and heartbreaking journey of Syrian refugees come alive in lounge rooms across Australia. Our reporters, those that we know, those that we've followed, explaining to us in Australia what has happened and why and what may happen next. It's the national reporting team bringing a depth of specialisation reporting to ABC News, specialists in defence and regional issues, social policy and consumer affairs, health and technology. I think the argument we didn't have a news-breaking culture carried little weight then, but I think if you look at the stories we're breaking, it carries none at all now. In this era, a Lee Sales interview is event television, with social media often shouting too hard or too soft in a way that brings me comfort that nearly all the time she gets it just right. In this era, the ABC is full of so many people creating so much powerful and distinctive work. The erudite credibility of Mark Colvin, the fearlessness of Sarah Ferguson, the tenacity of presenters like Tony Jones and Michael Brissenden, Alan Kohler's ability to find the simplicity on the other side of complexity, the incisive genius of Annabel Crabb, that brilliant cameraman, Louis Erriglou, who made The Killing Season look like it had a Hollywood feature budget, and insiders Hugh Parkinson, who looked at The Killing Season and saw that it was really a reworking of The Breakfast Club. I love the reference to Triple J Hack in the AFR's Power Edition last month. David Freelander, a partner at King & Wood Mallison, said, "I sit in an open plan office and all the guys who sit around me are in their 20s. And every week I learn something new that Tom Tilley told them on Triple J Hack. He seems to have a big influence on the thinking of the 20-somethings. These people, these programs, these stories, that important contribution to public life of the nation, uncovering the truth, exposing injustice, asking tough questions, building a shared understanding. It's the core of public broadcasting, and it's at the core of the ABC's news service. And it has to be treasured and protected and nourished now more than ever. It's a sobering reflection for those working in the industry that for all the changes we've seen, we might just be at the beginning of the digital revolution. Ahead of us in the media industry, there are 2 dominant forces: the power of technological change and the reality of the market that it shapes. And others are better equipped than me to anticipate the technological impact to come. But you see the threats of the future in your latest smartphone update. The relentless push to personalisation, The phone knows where you've been and where you're going, who you've spoken with and what you've looked for. It's better at anticipating your needs and meeting them. And as the futurist Paul Sappho said recently, when something is free, you just have to think carefully about how you are paying for it. You are paying for it, you've just got to think about how you're paying for it. And now we're paying for much with our information, with the details of our life, which others will then pay handsomely in order to access so that they can precisely target goods and services and information to us. That's the new market that's been created. And who is that payment going to? We understand the dominant platforms in this media world are the mobile platforms. And the firms dominant in this mobile space are not the old-style media providers. It is an iron law that we need to understand. Traditional media organisations will not dominate all the platforms that drive audience consumption. Since the emergence of online and the shattering of the long-established oligopolies in closed markets that distributed content and connected revenues, there has been an endless procession of challenges and wicked problems. First for the print providers, now joined by the broadcasters. Only last month it was evident in a simple statement from Apple CEO Tim Cook, which would chill the heart of traditional broadcasters. He simply said, the future of television is apps. The latest products provide a powerful demonstration to the news industry. Facebook's instant articles and Apple News. These dominant players in the mobile space are reaching out to traditional outlets for content. They want what we create for their users. On Facebook, content provided to this service quickly gets loaded up and prioritised to Facebook users. The publisher receives 100% of ad revenue if it sells the ads, but only gets 30% cut if the ad is sold through the Facebook network. And one US media executive said to me that no one in the media is making money out of mobile apart from Facebook. You just have to play on their turf under their terms. It's a Trojan horse. The New York Times now receives 14 to 16% of its online traffic from Facebook, twice as much as a year ago. And instant articles will see that figure skyrocket, making the Times dependent on Facebook for audience. Just look at the power of Facebook in video, delivering 4 billion videos a day, 4 times what it served a year ago. As Contently described it, as of right now, this looks a great deal for publishers. But this isn't just a Trojan horse. This is a Trojan horse draped in gold chains and being ridden by Beyonce. Even if you can see the outline of the hatch on the wooden belly, it's so hard not to open the gates. The same revenue model will apply for Apple News. It lands in Australia this month, and if you've seen the US version, you'll know it's so much like everything that Apple produces. It is sleek and clean and alluring. And everyone is getting into this news distribution business. Just this week, Twitter launched its new Moments feature, an access point for editor-curated material that again offers a platform to track an issue or a story from start to finish within the Twitter platform. And the other fascinating development emerges from those clever sites like Jonah Peretti's BuzzFeed, with its genius for constructing attractive and popular content and its increasing commitment to serious news stories as well. But it's the distribution method that must chill traditional media outlets more than the listicles. The whole model is predicated on a social media distribution strategy. It's not about drawing audiences to your website, where they will either pay you or advertisers will pay you. It's all about getting your audience to distribute for you, giving you a reach and engagement and a brand that's of such scale that you'll eventually be able to make it pay in the tradition of Facebook and Amazon. The long-cherished belief for traditional media organisations was the belief that online revenue streams could underpin the necessary investment in news and newsrooms. We have seen interesting models at play, like at The Guardian, with their international rollout of their websites. The New York Times does have 1 million subscribers with its freemium model. The Financial Times has done well. But for the rest, Getting the revenue from advertisers or subscribers for most online news services has been painful and debilitating. And instant articles and Apple News and the involvement of Twitter and other social media distribution shows just how much harder it's going to be for traditional outlets to get their share of the money. Banner ads are just about gone, paywalls are exceptionally tough, advertisers have never had more choice, and Apple and Facebook know more about your audiences than you ever did, from the 1.4 billion Facebook users to the 800 million iOS devices sold. And news organisations are wrestling with these issues intently. But it's that transformation of the business model that has led to our newsrooms being cut so dramatically. It's why so many journalists have lost their jobs. It's why there's so much more generic copy rather than local reporting. It's why there are so few investigative reporting teams or journalists with deep specialist knowledge. It's simply a legacy of decision-making by media management teams seeking to deliver a return to shareholders in this digital era that meets expectations. Decisions driven by shareholder value rather than public benefit. And citizens may be dismayed when the local newspaper cuts pages or the local broadcaster cuts the local edition, but often the share price kicks up because the investment in localism or specialisation or quality by commercial media is not paying its way any longer, and it's unlikely to in the future. On television, it's the inability to sustain any serious program on the schedule that is not flourishing in the ratings and that does not pay for its time slot, where the only metrics discussed are ratings points and advertising share. It's all been driven by the destruction of the business model. Competitors for audience attention coming from everywhere, a flood of free content destroying the pricing power of producers over consumers. It's a blossoming of choices for advertisers, drawing them away from platforms on which they were once dependent and which once charged them a premium to appear. Sadly, the hope of previous years of flourishing, profitable websites, of irresistible and unavoidable paywalls, floods of revenue by mobile-dependent consumers, all these things seem as far away as ever. Vast sums are being made, but not by traditional media companies. And as one of this country's most seasoned and wealthy bankers told me the other day, anyone smart with money is looking to get out of traditional media. That's not to say there won't be news, there'll be plenty of it. News can be quite cheap television content with enough courts and crime and sports stories to fill many a bulletin. There's never any shortage of copy. But what there might well be is a shortage of local journalists bringing local news to local communities and regional areas. Specialist reporters with a deep understanding of important but complex stories. Investigative reporting teams. Programs focused on rural issues, reporters bringing Australian perspectives on global stories. Delivering these kinds of stories with those kinds of reporters in this digital age is not a way to increase shareholder value, is not a way to drive up profitability, it's not a way to give your investors that all-important growth story. But a well-resourced public broadcaster can do it in a way that's designed to benefit citizens and the community, not investors. We do it to benefit our many owners, Australians everywhere, rather than just those who bought shares in our company. For commercial media, it needs to be all about the business. For the ABC, it can be all about the audience, to serve them, and in servicing them, serving the nation, to be a genuine public service. We have experienced vast change at the public broadcaster, and we know it's hard. Every program, every current investment has a fierce and vocal constituency, but we are investing hard in the digital infrastructure we need to deliver best for our audiences, to have a true audience-centred digital strategy. When I reflect on my time at the ABC, I know there have been initiatives that have been high profile, like the creation of News 24 and iView, but I suspect that the work we've done in the last 18 months might be the most enduring. Creating a digital network division, centralising and prioritising our UX and developer capacity, creating a new content management system, embracing human-centred design, planning a coherent and integrated user experience, and driving an audience content strategy that will help deliver a pipeline of initiatives for years to come. The great advantage the ABC has in this space, the crucial advantage gifted by the people of Australia, is that the ABC can be non-commercial, that the ABC can deliver news to citizens without having to consider first how to deliver profits to shareholders. It is a gift of national importance and enduring significance. Remember what Mr. Turnbull said as Communications Minister, that in this era, the ABC is more important than ever. And he also made the important observation that of all the problems facing commercial media, public broadcasting isn't one of them. From time to time, some competitors, you know who, seem to suggest that cutting into the public broadcaster might level the playing field and make everything right again in commercial media's world. But of course, we're taking no revenue from advertisers or consumers. And if the ABC wasn't there, there'd still be 300 hours of content uploaded a minute on YouTube, 1 billion providing content on Facebook, 500 million tweets sent a day, audiences watching 10 billion hours of content on Netflix in the first quarter this year, or consuming content on 1 billion websites. We would make no difference to the commercial media model if we weren't there, but if the ABC went missing, what we would miss would be the content that the ABC is in the best position to provide, Australian conversations and Australian stories that are important to our nation. It is a point that I will continue to make in Canberra. The funding for recent initiatives and news I referenced earlier, including some of our national reporting team and digital initiatives, were funded by the Gillard government for 3 years in the expectation we would rebid for those funds in our next triennial funding round, which is the next budget. And since we last sought funding from Canberra, the true destruction of investment in regional news has become evident, with sweeping job cuts, closure of newsrooms and services, and far more centralised programming. And we're also exploring whether there are other ways the ABC can work together with commercial media to forge a more robust media ecosystem in regional Australia. We're already linking to other commercial media's websites from ABC News stories online, but we are questioning whether perhaps we can do more to provide a better media service to Australians living outside of capital cities. It was said to me recently, if we didn't have an ABC, given what's happening in the media space, we'd have to invent it now. That's a fond hope, but difficult to imagine, I suspect. We just need to be grateful for those who had the vision to create, at the height of the Great Depression in the 1930s, those who had the vision to create a public broadcaster and then saw the important role it could play in news, who saw the benefit of the public broadcaster moving into television in the 50s, and then who encouraged its movement into the digital space. Because that vision of those people over those decades has given the nation today a comprehensive, cross-platform digital broadcaster. A broadcaster constantly striving for efficiency and value for money, whilst protected from the crushing commercial reality of the new media world. The ABC is a gift of the nation delivered to the nation, and in this era, I would propose it is more important than ever. Thank you.
You've compellingly talked about the changes over the last decade and the challenges of the next. What would you do differently, given your time again?
Look, it's interesting. I think most of the things I regret, I think are quite small scale. I think we've got the big strategy right. I always think, though, we struggle to communicate the breadth and richness of what the ABC is creating every day for Australians. I think, sometimes I give talks to community groups and I talk about what we're doing across all our platforms, and the feedback I get is people are astounded by how much there is. And at times I think people experience their ABC, it's your ABC, you're conscious of what you experience, but you sometimes find it hard to find that other programming that might be of interest to you, and you don't really appreciate the scale of what is being offered to Australians everywhere. And I still think a failing, even though we've worked hard at it, is that we undersell to the Australian people what they are funding and what we are delivering to them every day. And I've reflected in Canberra, I've said to politicians that they seem to be obsessed and focused around precisely 2% of content. They get hung up about Q&A and insiders and the occasional interview on 7:30 as if that's all we do. It's a fraction of what we do. And I actually think they overreact to many of the issues they raise on those matters. We can talk about that if we want to. But I still think in online, I don't think our experience is good enough yet. I think it's hard still to find content. I don't think it's the intuitive experience it needs to be. And I just still think we have still undersold the remarkable value that Australians are receiving for the 12 or 13 cents a day that they invest to get the ABC.
More advertising? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, I don't think it's... I think it is... what we should be able to do and what we will be able to do in a more personalised audience experience, particularly through online, is be able to suggest to you programs that you like. We will be able to know, if you use the ABC radio app, what you've listened to, and be able to help you find that on our 55 microphones around the country, the other content that might be of interest to you. And I think to talk more about the breadth of our content. I sometimes think the ABC is like one of those big old mansions that's been carved up into bedsit apartments. And people just don't really quite understand the richness of all that's there, and we need to make it easier for them to find that, I think.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to nominate your successor, because obviously that's not in your hands.
Because I had no intention of answering that question.
That's good. So. But what characteristics will they need to have?
Yes, that's a good question. I think it's a complex beast with a lot of moving parts. And at times some of my critics have suggested that why aren't I dictating the line taken on every news story, and very hands-on, particularly in news. It's a vast organisation with so much happening at any given one time. And I think in a way, what you need to do is be able to select and lead a great management team who are very capable at running their parts of the organisation. I do think you have to have a great curiosity and interest and passion for where the world is going. One of the things I was talking to Patricia Cavellis earlier tonight for an interview on Radio National, and I said one of the things that struck me very early on when I started was that you have a job like this, you really are a trustee. I feel that the ABC had celebrated its 75th birthday just after I started, and you know, my grandparents loved it, my parents loved it. I listened to Kindergarten on the air as a kid and had been engaged with it since then. But I knew that no matter how long I stayed, I'd really only be running it for a brief period of time in its history. And what you really wanted to do was, and I would frame it like this, I wanted it to be as loved and respected and as important in my children's generation and grandchildren's generation as it was in my parents' and grandparents' generation. And if you're really going to do that, you're going to have to be engaged with where the technology is taking the broadcaster, the opportunities that are provided by that, and how you remain relevant to the digital native children that are coming through, for whom I think, I sometimes say to people, I think our grandchildren will be astounded that to learn that we showed an episode of a drama, and if you wanted to watch the next episode, you had to come back 167 hours later at the same time to watch it. They will find that bewildering. They already find that bewildering. And so I just think a fascination and an interest and the ability to steer the ABC to where the audience is going to be, rather than just being contented with where it is now. I think it would have been a lot easier in a way to just be the grand old radio and television service. But what you'd have really been doing is conceding that it would not be as important to our children and our grandchildren's generations, and you need to be a trustee for them, I think.
Well, I could go on all evening. I would love to ask you what was your worst set of estimates, but I won't do that because my job is to curate.
It's probably still ahead of me, given what we've been through in recent months, but still.
Mark, thank you for the keynote tonight. One thing you didn't touch upon, for my sins I read far too many, and for my bad digestion, I read far too many comments online, right across all the outlets and the platforms. There is out there, you didn't mention it tonight, there is out there a divide in relation to the ABC. I'm interested in your analysis of what that's about, a resentment, a distrust.
Yes.
It's partisan, it's ideological,
Yeah.
and you read it all the time. You've probably read a million of them. What's your analysis of what that is,
Yes, okay.
and what should you do about it?
That's fair. Well, the first thing is I don't read the comments. I made that decision long ago, and I think there's I think there's an interesting debate on the role of comments in online, but that's for another time. Look, our research, we get Newspoll out every year to survey audience views around the ABC, and it's very consistent. And it came back this year again, you know, effectively 85% of the public believe that we provide a valuable, very valuable service. 85%. That's an astounding number, and I think we can lay claim to be the most popular institution in the country and the most respected institution in the country. But there are still 15% who do not like that. And 15% of people don't think we're valuable, and there'd be a portion of those who think we should be sold and think we should be shut down. And what online does is it gives everyone a voice, and if you're active and stirred enough and you're in the same places commenting, then those voices will be heard. One of the things I'd say to you, though, from my perspective, is that I get strong criticism from the right, which I think you're referring to. I also get some quite strong criticism from the left. I get criticism from what I would view to be the polar extremes of Australian politics. I get people who are outraged that the IPA regularly appears on the ABC. Why are they there? And people point out the irony that the IPA recommends that we be sold, and we give them a microphone to do that. I just think that there is an increased level of intolerance also in this digital era. I think it's very possible for you to listen to a radio station, to read a newspaper, and to go to blogs that all are reinforcing your view and can increasingly almost be a multiplier of intensity for you. And the ABC, and I think increasingly in this era, is a very broad church. On these new platforms we've created, places like the Drum and Q&A and the social media, we deliberately entertain all voices and all views and all perspectives. And I think that's an advantage for us. But there are people out there who get very agitated by hearing views and perspectives that are different to their own. And I think they are egged on by certain high-profile commentators. That's their shtick, that's their position in the marketplace, and they do it gleefully. At times I think they almost do it with a wink. You know, when I meet them in person, it's almost like it's nothing personal. It's just, you know, what we do.
Just business, as they say in the Mafia?
Yes, I think a bit of it is, I think, yeah.
Mm. Okay, we'll take another question. Yeah. And the next one will be on that side of the room. Yeah.
Given we now have a Prime Minister who seems to better understand the role of the ABC, and given some of the ministerial critics of the ABC have seemed to have been moved to the back bench, do you see a change in relationship between the ABC and the government, and do you think that augurs well or better for the next triennial funding submission?
That's a good question, and I think it's a little early to know. I think there's no doubt that we have a Prime Minister who has been more closely engaged with all aspects of the communications sector than any Prime Minister we've ever had before. You know, he was involved in television, he made a bid for Fairfax, he helped set up Aussie Mail. He's really been across it and is very across the nuance and subtleties of the business, I think. I think in fairness to Malcolm Turnbull, I should say he's been very focused on the ABC being as efficient as possible. He set up an efficiency review that helped that helped us find ways of saving money. Now, we would have liked to have reinvested that money in the organisation. A lot of that money went back to Canberra. But I suppose, look, my approach to funding is pretty simple. That I don't think we should get out there with a hat out and try and argue that we are the most worthy organisation in the country and the top priority. But I think we can go to Canberra and say there are things that are important that the ABC is in the best position to do. And that's why this crisis that's going to affect regional and rural media, the closure of local newspapers, the shutting down of local news services, that's a real issue. That's a real issue for those communities. That's a real issue for politics. That's a real issue for community discourse. Now, what is the government going to do about that? I don't think they're about to fund newspapers. I don't think they're about to pay money to Win or Southern Cross to stay open. But the ABC could do significant work out there if we're appropriately funded. So I'm not going to say to the government, we're underfunded, or I'm not going to say, give us back the money you just took, even though you said you weren't going to take it. But I am going to say there are things that we can do that are very important. And I think they will be persuasive, and I hope the government's receptive to logical and persuasive argument.
Okay, the next question here.
I've recently seen the ABC's had a focus on issues of mental health, and I think that's fantastic and really important. Do you think that as a public broadcaster, the ABC has a responsibility to create awareness to issues such as mental health and like homelessness and things like that, because they are the public broadcaster?
Absolutely, and I think frankly, we have an ability to do that, a muscle to do that, that we haven't, that we're just discovering, and it's proving to be a great moment for us, and I hope for the community. Lord Reith, who was effectively the founder of the BBC, talked about public broadcasting's responsibility to inform, educate and entertain. And we talk about wanting to be the home of Australian conversation and culture and stories. And so what I hope we're doing in Mental As is informing, educating and entertaining, but creating an environment where people understand mental illness better, but creating forums where people can talk about it. And it was really interesting. We did it last year and this year, and one of the things we did this year, we reflected on it, we thought mental health issues are very important in a workplace. And as an organisation, we need to do that. So we've run all these seminars for our staff around mental health issues and dealing with mental illness in the workplace, and they've all been oversubscribed. And so we've even seen its effect on us as an organisation. So we want to do more of it. I was saying to Margaret earlier, Sarah Ferguson has been spending time in a women's refuge and tracking stories of people who have endured domestic violence. That I think will be, just like the Changing Minds documentary, extraordinary television that will drive that conversation and drive awareness of that issue up in a very important time, and that will be another big event in November this year.
We have time for one or maybe two short questions. I think there's one here. Yes.
Firstly, Mr. Scott, thank you very much for what you and your staff provide, worth every one of the 12 cents. You've talked about what we might describe as an increase in the breadth of news availability, combined with the reduction in quality journalism, which is, I think, reducing its depth. What implications do you think that has for democracy, given that the electorate is perhaps less well informed?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's a little early to tell yet. But I think there are a number of things that are happening, and we're trying to think how we respond to it. I have a hypothesis at the moment that people are getting broad and narrow insight into a lot of news, that really through the day people are picking up headlines and grabs and just at a very thin level. But whether in fact that leads to a deeper and substantive understanding of the issues, I think that's the question. And I'm wondering if in fact there's a correlation between the difficulty that politicians have had to create an agenda for deep and substantive change, or there's almost a rejection from the electorate at a superficial level, almost before we've had the debate. There's an old line from Justice Kirby that I like, that in Australia we have the reaction before we have the reform. And I think increasingly we're seeing that. So I think part of the challenge for politicians, given the ubiquity of news and information available, is how they create those opportunities to create a longer and deeper and more substantive debate and discussion around the issues, rather than floating the issue for a day, floating an issue on Tuesday, but Thursday ruling it out because social media was so hostile to it. I think there's a challenge that the nation won't be able to deal with the big complex issues if in fact that's the only way that media is used. And I think already you can see the new Prime Minister having, trying to use the media in a different way, I think, and I think that will be kind of interesting to watch.
Time for one more short question. I'm afraid.
Short. As a person in their 70s, as I listen to your way describe the way media is going, I get overwhelmed. Do you think it's part of the ABC's role to actually give insights into people, how to actually use all these bewildering array of things without feeling like you're constantly listening?
Look, I think that's a really good question. And I think I would respond that I think we've done that to a degree, but perhaps we need to do it more. One of the things I find interesting, kind of looking back at perceptions and then looking at the reality, is how different parts, different platforms, different brands within the ABC have dealt with the technological change. I think you could have made an argument that Triple J would have been most threatened by all that younger audiences were doing, but Triple J has flourished its radio audience has doubled, it's dominant in online and social media, it's embraced it. But the other area that's embraced it is Radio National. You know, Apple said to me that Radio National was one of the earliest pioneers of podcasting anywhere in the world. And when you think of Radio National's content, I mean, so much great content, but often scheduled at inconvenient times, and often very hard to find, and the ability to unlock that and to make it available in podcasting, and for podcasting to be quite simple for our audiences to do, I think that has shown that age is this is not just a young person's phenomenon. In fact, the fastest growing category in Facebook is the over 50s. But yes, I think the ABC has a responsibility not just to say we're doing social media or say you can find it on our Facebook page or download the podcast, but possibly to provide more, to educate our audience on how to do it, to make it as simple and intuitive as possible. I don't think we've always made it simple and intuitive. And to walk that journey with our audience across all age groups and interest levels. Because I think what we've learnt is that so much of the content works in that digital environment, and so many of our audience, irrespective of their age, wants to engage with it in that way.
Well, as Tony Jones says most Monday nights, once again we're over time. I'm afraid we are going to have to call it to a close, and not because there isn't much more to say. Mark, it's been an extraordinary 9.5 years. I know you're not quite on your valedictory tour, but it will be coming up soon. Thank you for joining us at the New News this year, and good luck for the future.
Thanks, Margaret.
Please join me in thanking him.
Good.